Solomon Anomet O'jay. I guarantee his expert advice will change your perspective on tree planting, because growing is more than bearing a seed. It's like nurturing a child, watering, shading, and defending your seeds until they grow large enough to survive on their own. And he is always around trees, seriously. Whether planting mango and orange trees with the Green Futures Initiative or building a forest, he's action oriented. His words will empower you to go from simply talking about climate to taking action for our climate. And if that's something you want to do, then I encourage you to watch the video. Enjoy. Good afternoon, Solomon. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, can you just give a brief introduction of yourself and a little bit about your work?
All right, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. My name is Solomon Anomet from Uganda, an environmental activist and an environmentalist by profession. I'm an activist from Uganda, and I am an active volunteer with the Earth Volunteers organization, a youth-led initiative, and also Green Futures Initiative, and also a lot of other platforms from around here, Uganda. I'm activist driven by action. I'm action-oriented, and one of the most actions that I've been doing in my activism is tree planting and tree growing, because that's the simplest and unimpactful action that I've witnessed many people doing, and that's what I'm also trying to emulate in regards to what is happening in my home area. And we are facing a lot of biodiversity loss, and that is the trees that are being lost at a rapid state, going beyond what is going to be replaced. So that's what I'm trying to do in my community, and that's a brief I can talk about myself. So thank you so much.
And can you describe kind of what tree planting means to you? Because I've seen on your Instagram a lot of tree planting. It looked like you had this area you wanted 1,000 trees planted in, but it looks like also unique to your page that's different from most tree planting campaigns is your slogan, one tree at a time. So can you kind of explain your perspective on tree planting and I suppose it impacts beyond just the single tree alone, if that makes sense?
Okay, tree planting, I believe tree planting starts from some people choose to start from a sapling, a seedling, already grown seedling for some height or some size. But then tree planting starts from a seed, and that's what one of my stories talk about. And in most cases, if you've been keen, there are some tree species I've always been tracking. I started from a seed, then potted it in a container, then it grows into a sapling or seedling, and I keep on watering and caring for that sapling until I take it to the field or the garden to face the real environment outside there. So tree planting to me, I don't just remain on planting, because tree planting and tree growing, I believe these are two different things. When you plant a tree, it means you may not have that portion to always go and take care of it and nurture it into to turn into a big tree. So that's now when we incorporate in the idea of growing. So growing is nurturing until you see that the tree is at a stage that is no longer vulnerable to any damage or drought related issues. So I do tree planting right from the seed, and sometimes if I have capacity, I just go to outgrowers, and one of them is the National Forest Authority from Uganda here, abbreviated as NFA. So that's where I go and get some tree seedlings or tree saplings that I'm not able to grow on my own, because trees have a lot of species that may not really have much knowledge about how they are propagated. So some trees I just go get them from the the NFA, and some trees I grow them on my own. Like when I get a seed or when I get a fruit and eat, after eating the fruit, I don't just throw it away. I keep it, and then when the right time comes, I plant it, water it, and when it turns into a seedling, I take it to my homeland and plant it right there. And then I try to monitor and see how it responds. So in some instances, I've faced the challenge of drought. In my home area, we have a long dry spell, and we have only 2 seasons. And right now, we are winding up the first season, I mean, the second season in a year. And then next year, around April, that will be the first season of 20, 2024 in my area. So around April, that's the onset of the first season. Then around maybe down to September, from August to September up to December, it will be the second season. So in between there, we have 2 seasons of rain and 2 seasons of dry spell. So sometimes some species of trees do not do well in these harsh conditions of the dry spell. So in most cases, I'm always trying to go and do the watering and also trying to weed around the trees and see that they sprout. So that's my action about tree planting, and that's how I do
And you mentioned how you start the trees from seeds and then grow them inside in a bottle usually. How long does that take before you can transplant it outside as a sapling?
That's a brilliant question, and I really liked it. So the trees, we have different species of trees in Uganda here, and one of the commonest that I've been trying to plant, and the one that I have the most challenge because it has completely failed to grow in my home area. But it's an indigenous tree from around Uganda, except it's around the equatorial region. That's where it grows from. So what is interesting that some trees that grow in the equatorial area are the trees that I want to try and take to my homeland and try to water them around. So you talked about how long it takes. So I have a tree. I mean, there is a tree species that is called Myopsis emini. That in a local language we call it Musizi. If you're okay, um, I can type the name in the chat.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Myopsis emini is a locally called as is locally. I mean, it's commonly known as umbrella tree, but it grows. It's indigenous to Uganda and some Congo and Gabon areas. But that's a tree I've tried to plant, and that's the one I'm talking about. It has failed to respond in my home area because of the dry season. So that tree takes around, it takes like 3 months, or I mean 3 weeks or 1 month to break through the seed, like the seed to break through because it's a nut. Each seed is it comes from a nut, so it takes around that. And also there is a tree I planted. It's called the Terminalia catapa. It's a Terminalia species of tree, and that one also takes around 1 month to sprout from its nut. So other trees can grow a little bit faster, and they can also sprout like 1 week or 5 days when they have already sprouted. So different trees have different timing of sprouting, and also timing of also rapid growth or growing into a mature tree. So Meopsis mini can take around 5 years when it has at least grown into a big tree. And then terminalia also is a fast growing tree. Then there are some species that take long to really grow into big trees. So those ones are for the future and not for these people who want to benefit very fast. And also that brings me also to say that I do plant trees not for my own benefit, but then the trees that I'm enjoying today, I'm not the one who planted them. So growing trees is something that is looked at as a long process. But then what you have to appreciate is that today you are enjoying a tree that was not planted by you, or it may not even have been planted by your father. So that's the passion I'm trying to follow and trying to do, because today I enjoy fruits, but I don't know, I have no idea who planted them. And if always sometimes I try to trace back and I get stories about the trees and also how they were planted. So some trees have different time range in how they grow, and also the climate or the climatic conditions also matter. And one interesting thing that I also tried is that I've ever tried to plant a walnut in Uganda here, and it's still alive, though it is slow in growth in my home area. Yeah.
And when you plant as well, you mentioned with Green Futures and the other organizations you're involved in, who is helping you plant these trees?
Okay. Green Futures, it's a group of environmentalists, and then they come in together with some support and resources, and then they come up with a program on where out. So it's a collective effort of different environmentalists and activists, whereby they come with trees and we plant as a group. So when we go to a school gets prepared, we inform the school, and then the school gets the resources available. And what we need from the school normally is just a space for planting these trees, and probably the students get involved and know how and why it is important to plant trees. So that's basically that we need. But sometimes the schools take in an extra mile to help us in some areas where they think should be done. For example, some schools, when we bring a proposal to their school, they also add in more trees besides what we have come with. So sometimes we go with 500 trees, and this normally includes fruit trees and some woody trees or indigenous trees. And normally these indigenous trees are planted along the school boundaries. And then these mango trees, the fruit trees and oranges are planted within the compound of the school. So Green Futures, we normally organize our trees and we plant them as a group with the students. And then the initiative that I'm doing in the village is it's my own initiative, and I feel like I should have something to show as an individual, even when people may not have capacity to reach in some areas. Because right now I'm in Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, and I'm about 300 to 500 kilometers away from my home area. So that is how I have to travel up to home to do some actions on ground on my ancestral place. So I believe I need to have something of my own, and what I'm looking at is planting a forest. And that forest I want to show my community because what I can say is that they are kind of negative about environmental protection and tree growing and also forest restoration because of the activities that happen there. They feel it's actually impossible to do such a thing. So that's what I want to set a difference. And what I can say is that it's my own initiative, and then the community around my neighbors in the village are the ones that come in to help me with the planting processes. Let's say like digging the holes and preparing the site, and also engagement and sharing our stories about what I'm doing in a particular community. So when today I tell you that I'm doing this, you will go on to share with somebody in the next maybe neighborhood that you know Solomon is doing such and such a thing. And that's what exactly I want. I want the message to spread out and let know people that it's actually possible as long as you identify where a loophole is. If, say, you lack water, then that means you will have to improvise an irrigation idea. It may not be a sophisticated irrigation system, maybe just a simple one like drawing water from a well or drawing water from a nearby swamp and water your trees. So that's what I'm trying to do. And what I can say is that sometimes I choose to do my individual actions, and where there is more action in an organization that is organizing, I always go there and support and join them and share their stories. Thank you.
That's amazing. I like that story too. And you definitely are inspiring people,
Yeah.
from what I can tell. But I like how it's split up into both inspiring the students. And you said your goal is to build to grow an entire forest. How big will that be, I suppose? That seems like a very big goal.
Come again, how big is the space?
Is the space for that forest? Yes.
Okay, it's a big one. I don't know in what context, but to me, I feel it's a big one because some people look at growing hectares of land, and that's what they believe a forest is. But a forest can be as small as long as there are more than one tree. So the space is 2.5 acres
Well,
in an estimate, actually, and I had recently I had recently estimated to plant 1,000 trees on it, but then I started with 250 trees. And when I planted the 250 trees, they did not even take a half of the portion. That means 1,000 trees and more trees can sit in that space that I have. So the space that I'm covering right now, as I said, is 2.5 acres. But then I will not stop on only that because in my home area, we have boundaries from garden to garden because we are into agriculture and we do crop growing. So I'm looking at having at least a line of trees in each boundary of a garden. So that will be more than just 1 acre, but the portion where the forest will be raised at once will be 2.5 acres. And right about now, I just planted 250 trees, and I'm tracking because I've already had reports on what is happening on the trees I've recently planted. And I'm losing some because of some heavy rainfall. They were submerged in too much water and suffocated, but some are still surviving. So when I get back around April, I'll be replacing them and also adding more trees to cover the whole space.
I love that mission too. And what is the name then? Is there a name for your organization that you run? Or your program
I
independent?
don't have
No name. Okay.
I don't have I don't have an organization running it individually, but what I said is I join other activists and I volunteer with Earth Volunteers, especially is the one that I'm active with, and also the Green Futures Initiative. And there's also another one recently I was with it. It's called Treescape Organization. Is also an active one. So where there is active, where there's an activity that is action oriented, that's where I always run to. And some organizations have this space to do such action. So when I get an opportunity, I go. But as an individual, I don't have any organization that I run under my authority.
Thank you very much. So I think that covers a good amount about your tree planting. And I also noticed a post you made a little bit ago when you mentioned those first 250 trees. You mentioned that you planted those before the Africa Climate Summit. Can you kind of describe what that summit is like and I suppose exactly what the goals of it are and what you do there?
The Africa Climate Summit was the first of its kind in Africa, uh, and it's in relation with the conferences that have been happening around here. And one of them is the COP, the Conference of Parties, and the Bonn Climate Summit, and many more. But Africa Climate Summit was the first of its own in Africa here, and it happened in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, and I happened to be one of the should I say delegates, or I attended the summit. And so when I got there, I did not see anything different from what these other conference of parties have been doing, and also other summits or conferences. Normally, what's always there to me, I feel small talking and promising, but then when it comes to actual groundwork or implementation, it's kind of delayed, or if even if it's implemented, it's in state and delaying processes. So the 250 trees that I planted were in representation of my after my post Africa Climate Summit actions that I've already attended the Africa Climate Summit. Then what next? So I decided to come up with such an initiative and say, let me go and plant 250 trees in representation for this summit. And then it was not my own initiative. I did it with a friend. He's called Kenywa Samuel, and he runs an organization called Schools Eco Network Uganda. So it's an organization that looks at engaging students from Africa and connecting them with maybe the students in in the outside world or outside Africa to relate and share ideas on how to protect the environment and share more about climate change actions. So it was an initiative with that friend of mine called Tenya Samuel, and we did that from a district called Iganga district where he resides. And that's what we did in Iganga district. We planted those 250 trees in representation for the Africa Climate Summit that we had attended in September in Nairobi. Thank you.
I think that's really good. You said representation of it, but yeah, that's amazing how you went from the summit and actually did an action after, because kind of like you mentioned at first, it can at times be a lot of talk, especially during COP right now. So yeah, I love that so much, like an actual action that happened after it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And at that summit as well, did you have a chance to meet other activists? You mentioned your friend was there, but what was that like, meeting other activists like yourself?
It was something that I believe, we live in different areas and also in different continents, if I may say. And so sometimes people do believe in physical engagement and seeing people physically, in a sense that sometimes, the media is something that is funny and something that sometimes brings out stories out of impression, but when it comes showing real results, sometimes we are referred as, the internet, sometimes we are referred as scammers, like you do not exist or something like that. So sometimes your stories can be ignored because of that, because you've not met people physically. So I was amazed to meet some real actual activists that have always, me, it felt real to me because I couldn't meet them physically to share, but at least I was there to witness that such people are there and they are doing groundwork. So, to me, it was an eye opening for me that these things need to, some people have different ambitions when they go to summits or conference of parties and stuff. Some people have different ambitions, and so when we get there, we get to link up with people with real action and share more how to do things. And to me, that's what I feel like meeting other artists.
Thank you. So I think as we wrap up here, I have two final questions. This first one,
Mm.
feel free to think about for a moment. It's definitely it's hard, I think, to give a single answer, so feel free to think about. But because you've done so much with tree planting and then education as well, if there's one piece of advice you could give to anybody starting in the climate area, so whether that be from conservation, tree planting to renewable energy, anything really. If there's one piece of advice, what would you give to them?
Well, the piece of advice that I have for anyone out there who would like to do or who is doing and who also is undertaking maybe something related to conservation and maybe climate change sharing stories and also maybe climate change action. Do not be discouraged by the actions that you see there, and they are really so big as compared to what you're doing. Do not be discouraged. To me, I move with the slogan of one tree at a time, and I've faced a lot of challenges in doing this. In a sense that sometimes I can plant over 200 or 500 trees, and then in the end, I only get 10 or even 5 trees surviving, not because I cannot do it, but because of the natural calamities that are already happening, and one of them being climate change, which comes with prolonged drought. And prolonged drought comes, dries up my trees, and so only a few that resist the heat are the ones that make it. So don't be discouraged by the actions that you're doing, however small. It's just that you have to take a little more faith and encouragement, continue with what you're doing, and don't be driven by other actions that you think will overlap, will overrun your action. So just take your time, don't rush, and just do what you want. One tree at a time is my motive. So I'll always continue and I'll always do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love that. It's a great physical representation of what you're saying with the tree planting as well. You have 500 and only a couple survive, but that's how it goes. But I love how you persevere through that. And then the final thing we have
Yeah.
is the last guest that was on left a question for you. So this question, you can answer it in any way you would like. We talked about the African Climate Summit and COP a little bit. So her question for you was, what is your perspective on spaces like COP, and how will their impact, so usually they're focused on a national level, how will their impact then go to a community? How can we help that national impact come to a community level?
Okay, I said it, and we have sung songs, and we have called our leaders responsible, and also we have called a lot of things to be done at these spaces. Excuse me, at these spaces. But then what we see is a continuation and pile of pledges in these spaces by these world leaders. Now, recently, as you've seen in COP28, we have witnessed that the president at COP28 already declined, saying that the science of ending fossil fuels is a myth, does not exist. And yet, down here, we are saying phase out fossil fuels or reduce or adapt, something like that. So, and we see that these world leaders are always negative about what we are calling. And so, to me, I believe what they are doing right now is kind of a designed process for delaying action as activists. So, because we have put so much pressure on the world leaders and their activities, so I believe it's kind of like a designed process to bring up such spaces to delay action for us as activists by making us busy negotiating in these spaces. And when it comes to action, we are actually delayed and no result is always brought up. So on a national level, I don't see anything because there was always a pledge of in the compensating the countries on the damages that they already facing the loss and damage fund, and you see some delay of that because even up to now the loss. And what does not tell you, because now we are running again to another COP. Next, we shall be having COP 29 and also bring another theme. Yet the previous ones are still pulling jargons to, fulfill these pledges and negotiations that have been made. So to me, on the national level, it's delayed, and also it becomes work on a community level or down to the local person. So to me, I feel like it's our own initiative to start up things that are going to make us survive, so that when even these pledges come in at a later time, at least when we have a step ahead on what we are doing. So this will be coming maybe to refurbish what we have failed to maybe do with the capacity that we have already, so that when these other fundings that are delaying come in, or these other initiatives or help that is coming in as pledged in these spaces, that means we need to have something that we are doing already on ground. So when these things come in or these help come in, it's just to step up what we already have in existence. So I don't see much in these spaces, and it also gives me a question. And I don't know if it's okay, but it gives me a question, and I still ask myself, why do some iconic activists that started some movements, why are they backing down from attending such conferences? It's a question for me and you to really ask yourself, why do these iconic activists already moving out from such conferences? Because they have realized a greenwash designed to delay action. So that's why you're finding some iconic activists are not appearing there, even when they have capacity to appear there. So it gives a question to as to why they are doing it. So, and to me, I'm not surprised to see them backing down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solomon. I think that's an amazing question, and it maybe in a way, like you're saying, their decision not to attend is almost sending a broader message that activism like you're doing like smaller activism and activism from individuals and these organizations who genuinely care is really what's making the impact. Every once in a while, we'll have a piece of legislation or something political that will help, but it's much more common to see activists making the actual change. So thank you so much for your work. It was amazing to hear about your tree planting. I love your perspective on the African Climate Summit and on COP and events like that. And I hope to follow your organization and see how the tree planting goes and update everyone on how your forest goes. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I really appreciate.